was the source material that I used to create the thumbnail, with no need to move far from it to make him appear any more evil than what he already is. And that is, of course, from the Liberal Party, the Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney. And what I wanted to share with this video were 3 clips. And they're pretty short. The first one runs about 4 minutes, the next one about 5, and the last one about 15. That isn't too bad. And I wanted to do an impromptu introduction to it. And before I get any further with what this is, the second introduction, I'm going to leave my little mistakes in, and I'm not going to repeat what I did earlier, which was, I just went for it, and I ended up with a really good introduction, because this material may not be very interesting to most people, especially Canadians who should be the most interested, which is Canada is on its way to becoming a police state this year, 2025, with what the Liberal government wants to accomplish. And 2 of the examples I can give you. How do you like the idea of not being allowed to use cash over $10,000? Yeah. Illegal. And our money is pretty next to impossible to counterfeit as it is. And if you deal in large sums of cash, and these days 10 grand isn't all that much, you can get a little gadget to check, like they have in convenience stores, to make sure that the bill is legit. And that's what this man and his bunch of liberals, the new modern left, wants to do. It's going to be illegal for a Canadian to use anything more than $10,000 worth of cash. Why would they do that? It's the thin edge of the wedge. It's the inch that becomes a mile. Because if they can make anything over $10,000 cash use illegal, then they can just adjust it down again to $5,000. And who's going to be reporting on this? The mainstream media, which relies upon the Liberals for subsidies? I guess they're not going to be giving the Liberals a hard time and any of that. So if the Liberals want to make it illegal to use cash, and they get away with it, then there'll be another step. Well, you don't need anything more than $5,000, you naughty Canadians. And another thing is allowing the postman to open your mail without a warrant. Yes. So I went on a bit long with the introduction. I thought I did a great job, and it ran for 19 minutes. And then I was like, who's going to sit around for 19 minutes? Well, Canadians should, if you have an interest in this, which you really need to, if you're interested in losing your liberty. And that's not the only, those are not the only items that they're working on. So, what I'm doing here with the second introduction is letting you know in advance. And I'm going to give you a way to just blow past my original introduction of 19 minutes by putting timestamps in the description. So that's what I'm adding to it with this second introduction, and the earlier one will come after this. So it's 19 minutes of a lot of history, if you're interested. And then after that, there will be about a 5-minute clip from a man by the name of John Carpay, who explains this very well. And then it's 4 minutes from a Canadian MP, and then it's about 15 minutes from another Canadian MP. So that's what it is. And there will be the timestamps in the description. And now that you know what to do and how to jump through my longer introduction if you don't want it, which you probably do not, let's get started now.
Canada will be a police state by Christmas if Parliament passes bills C2, C8, and C9 in their current form.
Let me try to whet your appetite with what this man is going to speak to regarding Canadian bills C2, C8, and C9. I haven't read up on all of them. I like to be very knowledgeable at something if I'm going to talk about it. And with this, I just found out about it recently, and I take this man at his word that these things could be passed before the end of the year, and then Canada will be a police state. And you might recall that during the trucker protests, I believe it was the provincial government, it might have been the federal, I don't know. It was either provincial or federal government froze the assets of people who were organizing the trucker convoy. And it was just nonviolent demonstration. It wasn't an insurrection. They didn't storm Parliament Hill. It was a protest. And it was a protest for liberty. And I'm just talking unscripted. If I make mistakes, I'm going to leave them in. Because I think this data should be shared quickly. So I've got this man's work, and I'm just going to share it. And if I can't imagine him copyright striking the channel. And I've also got 2 Canadian MPs, a man who really looks underfed. I try to put in a couple jokes. And I'm going to finish off with a Canadian Conservative MP who is a black woman. So I don't have a lot of time for any criticism from people who are on the far left who want to dismiss this as right-wing material. My understanding of the left always used to be they tax more, they spend more, they interfere in the marketplace, and they want to take care of people a little bit too much, and there's nothing too much wrong with that, and that should be changed over to conservative ways, which is you favor the marketplace more, there's more opportunity for people. Neither of those two ideas are perfect. So they should slide back and forth. And don't get me started on the two-party system. It's just that the modern left is about censorship. And, as we saw with Charlie Kirk, he got murdered, and then the culture around that murder rejoiced. And I made a video about it, and people are dismissing my channel as, oh, you're just Trump MAGA. You can't talk to anybody anymore. If Bruce Springsteen or Oprah Winfrey, both big supporters of Kamala Harris, had gotten assassinated, I would not be celebrating. I would feel ashamed if anybody was doing that. Ashamed for them. You don't celebrate something like that. And they did. That's what they use their social media for. They were glorifying in Charlie Kirk getting murdered. And that's what I think of the modern left. They're far beyond just taxing and spending more. It's like if you just wanted to say the left and the right. Tax more, spend more, tax less, more opportunity in the marketplace. They're a little bit more mean for the social programs. That's the difference. If you want to define either of those as being good and evil, you're really taking it over the top. Yet when one side believes in utter censorship and delights in the murder of people for expressing their opinions, that is when it becomes good and evil. So when I talk about the left, I mean the modern left. I'm not talking about the liberals or the NDP. I mean the modern left is evil. I still don't mind a little taxing and spending or a little taking it back and being more conservative, yet the modern left is evil. And that includes the modern Liberal Party. So it's a lot of talking about politics, which I know most of you hate. And I got in arguments with you, said stay in your lane, and I really resented that. If anybody ever tells you in any walk of life to just stay where you are, stay in your lane, sit down and shut up, that really pisses me off. And so I didn't ban anybody. There used to be somebody come in here, name was Sal Smith, would give super chats and said, stay in your lane. Go do reactions to Danny Rate My Takeaway. And I gave him the biggest insult I could give anybody around here. I said, if that's how you feel, go make the fucking reactions yourself. And that's because that person insulted me first. So I'm just trying to set the fucking stage here, so you might watch this. Canada is becoming like the UK. They are going to approve, if they can get away with it, the Liberals. Just a couple things that I can remember. Don't worry, I'll get to the video very soon, okay? I'm just trying to set the stage. Warrantless searches of your mail. It used to be you had to go get a judge's order to do crazy things like that. This is like, going to like Nazi Germany, like your papers, you have your papers, please? And they just go through the mail like it's nobody's business. And you used to trust your mail in Canada. You soon won't be able to. And judges don't make excellent decisions as it stands all across the board. There are activist judges who don't serve justice itself. Big surprise. This doesn't even have to get in front of a judge. It just, somebody decides that we're going to have to take a look at your mail based upon how you're expressing yourself. Because the government will consider virtually everything as being, quote, hate, close quote. And that's the slippery slope. And you don't turn back from it. And what was the other thing? It's going to become illegal to use more than $10,000 cash at a time. Now, American dollars are quite easy to counterfeit, as far as I know. And Canadian dollars are much more difficult because they're plastic and they got some hologram work done on them. The thing is, you can still trust Canadian money. And if you got like a little gadget in a convenience store that will test to make sure you got a genuine bill, there's nothing wrong with using cash. And in this day and age, especially with inflation, the sum of $10,000, especially Canadian dollars, is not adding up to a pinch of raccoon shit. And that's what the liberals want to make illegal. You can't deal in cash above $10,000. What bloody reason would they have for that? If this is put in place, it just gives him the power to say, now we're going to reduce it to $5,000. You can't deal in cash over $5,000. And then what? And it's okay. Well, we're just going to put the cap at $1,000. What the fuck is this? And yeah, I know, a lot of talking. There are some important things going on. And you should use your voice. This is, got 5,000 subscribers, at least on paper. This channel's been around for more than 6 years. If we reach a couple hundred people, good. And then it's like, well, Canada's central bank will now take over and issue you a digital pass. And that's what you're going to have to use. That's where they're taking it. It's step by step by step. I can't remember who the quote came from. It said that freedom is a great jewel, and you should suspect anybody who dares to approach it. It's something like that. That's what the quote is. And so they're marching towards your ability to make transactions privately with Canadian cash. That's what the liberals are trying to accomplish. And that goes far beyond taxing more and spending more and just being, the traditional left. And here's the other thing. Orders from government officials who consider your speech to be a threat. Now, a threat used to be this. You threaten people or property. That's it. And I don't let anybody here make any threats, even as jokes, to the people that we react to. Like, if somebody says this person has a punchable face, I say, you can't say that. Edit it, or I gotta take it down. If you keep coming in here and say punchable face, I'm gonna have to ban you, because you can spoil all the fun. Threat to people and property. That's what violence, that's what constitutes violent threats. You see, what the government wants to redefine is that they can just say strong criticism, angry words are potentially a threat, that they qualify as hate. And so government officials, without having a day in court with you there, can instruct your internet service providers, and there's only two big ones in Canada, Rogers and Bell, to kick you off the internet. And because there's secrecy built in, you won't even know what happened. You're just going to be told, hi, this is Rogers or Bell. You are no longer a customer with us. Thank you for your cooperation. You know how it goes. If you get a business turned down, thank you for your cooperation and your understanding. And you'll be like, what the F happened? What's going on? And then eventually you're going to have to do your own work, digging and digging and digging to see if there's any sort of records in the government. And eventually you'll find out the government did it. And it's like, well, now what do? You can't do commerce. You can't interact with healthcare providers. You can't work. All of that stuff is wiped out because some fucker in the government thinks that you're criticizing the government too much. I like to criticize the CRTC. It's been documented in many pieces, including a book called The Barefoot Channel, published years ago, about the loss of the look at this. Aren't I amazing? I can talk like this for so long without a script. The loss of the public access channel in Canada. Like, you remember that bit on Saturday Night Live, Wayne's World? Well, that was a community access, public access cable channel in the United States. Now, this was all before YouTube. So nobody bothers with the public access cable. The thing is, in Canada, the cable providers got the CRTC to have them give up on the public access portion of their community channel by saying that the satellite providers didn't have to do it too. So instead of the CRTC, going after the satellite providers, they just caved in and said you don't have to have a cable public access channel either. That's just one instance. And another thing, here I am criticize the big media in Canada. If Rogers or whatever cable service provider you has owns the rights to have that region, it's illegal for you to lay cable in the same region. Let's say you bought an old warehouse and you set up a production studio and you bought a bunch of old movies for like next to nothing, and you started inviting local people to put on shows and stuff, and you started asking people, you want to be linked up to this cable system, and you started laying cable. They would come with the police and say, here's a court order. Well, the police would come eventually. You would get a court order saying you're not allowed to do this, shut down these operations. Rogers has this. It's like a license to print money. It's like if McDonald's could put Burger King and Wendy's out of business in any region, say, we got the license. You're not allowed to sell a hamburger here. Wow, this is a big talk, and I said the videos would start soon. So I'm providing an example. Plus, why not show off how fucking smart I am? So that's to provide an example of something that I like to complain about, not much on this channel, where there's an insidious relationship between the CRTC in Canada and the big media providers. And don't get me started on the fucking CBC, which is wildly leftist biased, has a few good shows, yet the role it has to play in Canada is over. Anybody with a computer and a cheap camera or just on their phone can now, produce electronic media. We don't have to rely on the CBC to be our, protector of Canadian culture from our neighbors in the United States. It's bullshit. It's $1 billion a year, fucking virtually wasted. They should just, anyway, that's another subject. The thing is, if I want to complain about these things angrily and swear about it, it just takes a government minister, official, to make the decision, this sounds like a lot of hate to me. I think you could inspire somebody maybe to do something. Even though there's no threats to people and no threats to property, therefore it is not criminal and it's protected free speech, they could just say, kick KDRC off the internet. And there's nothing you can do about it. It's like if you get a bad charge from a cop, what are you going to do? Call the cops? If the government, without a warrant, and without without a judge's order, without a day in court, says to your internet service provider, kick them off the internet, they get kicked off the internet. And for individuals, it's a $15,000. This guy is going to tell you what it is. I think he does. I think it's a $15,000 per day fine for not complying for an individual person, which will bankrupt you in 5 minutes. I think it might have been. I can't remember. It might have been 50,000 for all. I can't remember. 15 or 50, and 15 million per day for internet service providers who don't follow the orders. So that's how quickly you lose your freedom of speech in Canada. And I don't know if he was the first person to say, Greg Vezina of the None of the Above Direct Democracy Party said that we don't have any rights. And he's right, and I'll explain you what he said. We don't have any rights in Canada. The only people who have rights are those who have money enough to pay for lawyers to protect our rights, to protect their rights. And that's the quote. And so your only recourse is to try to slowly fight back. Well, how do you begin to marshal your defense when you've been kicked off the internet? You see, I could talk about this for hours. I'm amazed at how well I'm doing. There's no mistakes here. There's no script. It's just, this has been a big subject for me. And I wasn't aware of what the fuck the liberals were doing, and just what I'm doing now. I'm not going to bleep out my F-bombs. The fucking liberals. And I know I'm probably going to lose even more people around here. Oh, you're all MAGA. I don't mind some leftist ideas, including socialized healthcare. The modern left believes in censorship. They're the ones that are building the dystopian fucking state, not the conservatives. Conservatives are not perfect by any means, yet it takes a fucking modern liberal to come up with this shit. So, your recourse is to begin a long fight that will take years and about $100,000 to get a lawyer. And if you represent yourself, the judges will just laugh at you. They'll treat you like shit. They'll give you a process. They won't give you justice. And who's going to report on this? The mainstream media? You think you've got a story? You're going to go, I'm going to go to the papers. Oh, yeah? Really? What, the same papers that give tiny little profiles of people that run for smaller parties? You're going to go to the mainstream media? I'll go to the press! Like, what do you think this is, the 1930s or something? No one's going to report on it. And you won't be able to report on it either. Because you've been kicked off the internet. And like, what, you're going to rent a different apartment? And what, use phony ID to try to, contact Bell and say, I'm now somebody else? No, they're going to ask who you really are, because who are we going to bill this to? That'll be like, ban evasion. And you'll just get fined another $15,000 or $50,000 per day. That will wipe out the average citizen, and there's no recourse. So there are no rights. There's no way to fight back. And that's just a few of the things that they're talking about. So probably most of you didn't even fucking listen to this. I mean, there's more to life than just making, I like to have a good time with this Ken Domik thing, and I'm looking forward to the JP and Julia civil trial, if it's ever going to happen. It was supposed to happen in November, and here's November. Yet there are some other things you should consider. And plus, for the Americans, right now you got Trump protecting you, and you better hope nothing that he doesn't give up on any of his ideas, because the UK is going to hell, and the framework has been set up for Canada now. And well, it's a pretty big introduction. I've now talked longer than what all the other videos would have been put together, and why not? What the fuck? If you got an interest in this stuff, you do. And then it was interesting. If you have no interest in this, then it's like, let's just do another. And I like doing them. They're funny. It's just, this, okay, I gotta shut the fuck up. Just keep in mind that this kind of criticism of the mainstream media and criticizing our fucking government, all of what I've just done here, could be considered hateful. And, in the opinions of a government asshole, idiot, fucker, that I find it a cause for concern. And then they kick KDRC off the internet. And then how do I let you know what happened? Because I go with my name trying to get another service provider and say, no, sorry, you're banned. Then what do? You see, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms doesn't even fucking exist, because it can be used for toilet paper after other bills put into law wipe it out. That's what it means that there are no rights. There's only rights for people rich enough to pay for lawyers to protect their rights. And that's it. So now, let's get to this man and what he has to say. And then there's an MP and another MP.
C2 is the Strong Borders Act. It should be called the Strong Surveillance Act. It empowers Canada Post to open letter mail without a warrant. It criminalizes the use of cash in amounts greater than 10,000. And it empowers a vast army of government officials, not just police, to conduct warrantless searches of the computers and cell phones of Canadians. It is a massive invasion of privacy. It's extremely dangerous. We then have Bill C9, which is the Combating Hate Act. And this legislation is going to result in many more Canadians getting prosecuted, not over something that they've done, but on the basis of something that they have said or written. Bill C9, the Combating Hate Act, gets rid of an existing requirement that hate speech prosecutions need to be reviewed by the Attorney General. And it also gives judges authority to impose much longer sentences, jail sentences on people if the judge feels that hate was part of the motivation in the commission of the crime. Bill C9 still does a terrible job of defining the emotion of hate, and so there's lots of discretion left in subjective feelings of police officers, crown prosecutors, and judges. So that's a serious problem. There have been warnings that the Online Harms Act, which prior to the last election was known as Bill C-63, might be reintroduced. If the Online Harms Act is brought back and passed into law, you're going to see the Canadian Human Rights Commission with massive new powers to prosecute Canadians over offensive non-criminal speech with penalties up to $50,000. You're going to see a Digital Safety Commission with a vast army of bureaucrats to enforce federal regulations that are passed in respect of the internet and internet contents. And you're going to see Canadians punished preemptively because their neighbor fears that they might commit a hate speech crime in future. The Online Harms Act would authorize judges to place Canadians under house arrest and wear an ankle bracelet in respect to curfew, etc. People who have not been charged with any offense or convicted of any offense. So preemptive punishment is actually part of the Online Harms Act. Now, last but not least, currently before the House of Commons, we have Bill C-8, the Cybersecurity Act. This gives federal cabinet ministers the power to kick individual Canadians off the internet. The Cybersecurity Act also allows the government to acquire subscriber information and to designate any company as a designated operator, impose all kinds of rules on that company. It gives the cabinet ministers powers to demand information, which must be turned over, and expressly says there's no compensation to any Canadian individual or company that suffers losses because of a minister's order under this Cybersecurity Act. Administrative penalties for not complying with the minister's order up to $50,000 per day for individual Canadians, and up to 15 million for Canadian companies not complying with a minister's order. Now, theoretically, a Canadian who's kicked off the internet can go to court, but for that you need $100,000 in a bank account to be used for litigation that's going to drag on for years. So practically speaking, there's not a real remedy available if under Bill C-8, if a federal cabinet minister kicks a Canadian off the internet. Politicians never take away our rights and freedoms without offering a nice sounding pretext. And so we've got the federal government saying that we need Bill C-8, Cybersecurity Act, to protect us from hackers, ransomware fraudsters, malicious cyber actors, and hostile state actors. Now, and of course, the sacrosanct national security and public safety, which of course every Canadian supports. The fact is that hacking into someone else's computer system, causing damage, are already criminal offenses. The powers are there already for the government simply to enforce the criminal code. Giving the federal government, giving federal cabinet ministers power to kick Canadians off the internet is not necessary for protecting public safety or defending our national security. Our freedoms are fragile. It's imperative that every Canadian contact their member of parliament, whether your MP is Liberal, Conservative, NDP, Bloc, or Green, does not matter. Contact your member of parliament and tell him or her to vote against bills C2, C8, C9, and tell them to not bring back the Online Harms Act. I'm John Carpe. Thanks for listening.
That means, in accordance with a so-called internationally recognized methodology that very conveniently isn't defined in the law.
Instead of getting that clarity, what they got was confusion. And in some cases, those standards weren't widely understood. There was no guidance accompanying those standards. And I think the business community had a lot of legitimate concerns about how to apply them in practice.
Companies that fail to substantiate their claims based on this undefined, internationally recognized methodology can face punitive fines of up to $15 million per representation. And to top it off, this liberal anti-energy gag law opens the floodgates to radical environmental groups to bring forward frivolous actions against energy companies before the Competition Tribunal. Before this law, only the Independent Commissioner of Competition could seek an order against a business under the applicable provisions of the Competition Act. But now, under the Liberals' anti-energy gag law, non-governmental and not-for-profit groups have a new private right of action. So it's obvious what is going on here. This is all about shutting down truthful and evidence-based information about Canada's energy sector that gets in the way of the Liberals' radical, anti-energy, keep-it-in-the-ground agenda. And any company that dares to step out of line risks being tied up in litigation, harassed by radical environmental groups, subsidized with taxpayer dollars by Mark Carney's Liberals, and forced to defend the truth against a vague and completely subjective standard, failing which they risk being hit with punitive multi-million-dollar fines. It's draconian, it's Orwellian, and it's exactly what the Liberals are all about, controlling Canadians through censorship to advance their radical agenda.
Resuming debate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today with heavy concerns about Bill C-8, a law presented as a measure to secure Canada's telecommunications and critical infrastructure. I think that we can all agree that cybersecurity is very, very important. Our informational networks are the lifeblood of our economic, education, health systems, and daily lives. Protecting this critical infrastructure is essential, but Mr. Speaker, without liberty, there can be no security. As such, my speech today will focus on how Bill C-8 impacts on individual liberties of the average Canadians. Bill C-8 grants the federal government sweeping powers. It allows the Minister of Industry, with the direction from Cabinet, to order telecommunications service providers like Rogers, TELUS, and Bell to act, to refrain from action, to remove equipment, to prohibit certain services, and in extreme cases to suspend or terminate services to even individual users. While Bill C-8's intention is to focus on service providers, it indirectly encroaches on the fundamental freedoms of Canadians by failing to carve out an exemption for individual Canadians who rely on the internet and telecommunications to work, to travel, to communicate, to engage in commerce and banking, and connect in their virtual communities. Mr. Speaker, consider what that means in practical terms. In today's world, losing access to telecommunications or the internet is not just a minor inconvenience. It is a form of isolation. It can it can prevent someone from working, from learning, from paying bills, from accessing health care, and participating in civic life. It is, in essence, a digital prison. And here is the gravest concern about C-8. It contains provisions of secrecy and non-disclosure. A person whose internet is cut off may not know why their services were terminated. They may not know the evidence against them. They may not have a meaningful opportunity to defend themselves. A Canadian could be trapped in a digital prison with no way to challenge it. Bill C-8, therefore, breaches fundamental guarantees under the Charter of Rights. Mr. Speaker, this strikes at the heart of our Constitution. Section 7 of the Charter guarantees that everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of the persons, and that right is not to be deprived thereof except in accordance with the principles of fundamental justice. Fundamental justice includes knowing the case against you and having a fair opportunity to defend yourself. Bill C-8, as it stands, allows the government to deprive individuals of essential services without ever seeing the evidence, which is a profound breach of these principles. Section 8 of the Charter, which protects against unreasonable search and seizure, is also engaged. The bill also allows the government to collect private information without consent with minimal safeguards. This combination of secret orders and the lack of disclosure creates a scenario where Canadian privacy and liberty are deeply at risk. Even if national security is invoked, Section 1 of the Charter requires that limitations on rights be proportionate and necessary and minimally impairing. Secret orders, broad powers, and no avenues for defense fail this test. Canadians should not have to surrender their rights to remain secure. Security and freedom can coexist. The government can both defend our telecommunications networks and protect the rights and freedoms of all Canadians. Bill C-8 may secure networks, but as it stands, it risks imprisoning citizens digitally and denying them fundamental justice. In so doing, it undermines the very freedoms that we seek to protect. Let us not mistake security for liberty. Let us not trade our rights of Canadians for a false sense of protection. Mr. Speaker, let me give you a concrete example of how Bill C-8 could affect an ordinary Canadian. Imagine Sarah, a citizen, frustrated with the government program that she believes was mismanaged and that was corrupt. In her frustration, she posts online, threatening to expose government corruption. She threatens to reveal secret information she has collected about the program. The government views her post as a threat to telecommunications system, and so quietly issues an order under Bill C-8. Her internet provider receives the direction to shut down her internet and phone services, all without a court warrant, and all without court order. The same provider is legally forbidden from disclosing that reasons why Sarah's internet was suspended. If the provider were to explain, they could face penalties and even jail. The next morning, Sarah is shocked to find that she cannot access her mail, her bank account, or work portal. Her social media accounts are frozen. She cannot contact her friends, family, and colleagues. She has been cut off entirely from the digital world, and she has no idea why. This is a system of double secrecy. The government order is hidden, and the provider is prohibited from telling her anything. Sarah cannot see the evidence against her. Sarah cannot ask questions, and she has no way of defending herself. She is effectively trapped in a digital prison, isolated, powerless, and silence. Over the following days, the impact deepens. Sarah cannot pay her bills, participate in remote work, access healthcare portals, or communicate with anyone. Eventually, she finds out that the government is behind this, so she attempts to challenge the order, only to hear that any judicial review may involve secret evidence that she cannot see. The provider has the information, but under Bill C-8, they are not allowed to share it. Every attempt to assert her rights is blocked. She is not merely inconvenienced, she is entirely cut off with no meaningful recourse. Mr. Speaker, this scenario is conceivable and legal under Bill C-8 as it stands. It illustrates why BC-8 secrecy and non-disclosure provisions are so dangerous to individuals. You may say that this would never happen. The government no doubt will insist the intent of the bill is clear. But why should Canadians trust them? We must take the bill at face value. We must rely on what the text explicitly sets out in the law. Otherwise, the law intended to protect telecommunications infrastructure could easily be weaponized by any government against ordinary citizens. Citizens most at risk are people like me, Those who publicly and loudly express dissent, challenge orthodoxy, or raise uncomfortable truths. These citizens most active in civil society are most at risk of being cut off, penalized, and isolated without ever knowing why. For these reasons, Bill C-8 undermines the principles of fundamental justice in the Charter as it stands. Security in this context can be a pretext for control, while transparency and liberty are sacrificed. Mr. Speaker, Sarah's story is not just hypothetical. It is a warning. Bill C-8 risks turning ordinary Canadians into prisoners of secrecy, silence without cause, and stripped of their most basic rights. We can secure our networks without the risk of trapping innocent citizens in a digital prison and without stripping them of the ability to defend themselves. This can be done. We can provide clear exemptions in the legislation for individual users, it should be a part of what we discuss at committee. These are practical, reasonable measures that governments could adopt. Mr. Speaker, we owe it to all Canadians to do everything in our power to elect leaders that will not be silenced, that will protect their security and will guard their freedoms, because freedom without security in itself is a cage. With the honourable member from South Hespeler. Thank you.
Good job. I thank the member for indicating to the chair that she was splitting her time. The honourable parliamentary secretary, the government house leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not sure. I believe the member is going to be. I'm not too sure if she's in support of the legislation, to be honest. It comes across as she has some concerns for individuals like Sarah. I think the minister has been fairly clear as we go through this legislation. C8 is important for many different reasons. The one that I just recently highlighted was the fact of the consumer, of our economy. And we need to protect through cybersecurity. It is not an option for government to do it. It's something that has to be done. And I'm wondering if the member would not at the very least agree cybersecurity to protect the Canadian economy is absolutely critical, and we need to have the legislation, and maybe it's just a question of having some amendments that would address some of the concerns that the member has put forward.
The honourable member for Haldeman Norfolk.
I thank my honourable friend for the very important question. Yes, I want all Canadians to know that cybersecurity is an extremely important thing in this digital era. It is very important for the government to take this seriously, and this bill is a very, very important bill. But that does not mean that there are elements in this bill that, as a legislature, if I see, and as a trained lawyer, that I must bring to the public's attention. And there are some concerns about how individual users are not properly treated in this bill, and they need to be corrected. Thank you.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Edmonton Manning.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and congratulations to my colleague for such a wonderful speech, highlighting an important issue. There's a lot of concerns we hear from Canadians about Bill C-8. Some of them she included in her speech. Maybe she needs to shed the light again on those concerns. That would be great.
Member.
Thank you to my honourable friend for the question. I think the most important issue of this bill is we recognize that there are times when our telecommunications infrastructure is threatened, and in those instances the government must act expeditiously to minimize and to curtail that threat. However, when these provisions can seep over into the realm of ordinary citizens, and then just the example I gave of Sarah, where her entire life is unraveled because of this legislation, I do not believe that this should have been the intent of this legislation. And so we really need to look at the impact of this legislation on ordinary individuals, because the average Canadian needs their telecommunications in order to facilitate every aspect of their life.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The honourable parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Canadian Identity and Culture.
Thank you. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for their speech. Now, I just want to come back on one point. You're saying it's important for cybersecurity, and you put the emphasis on Sarah's story, and of course, private life should be protected. But what are the advantages for the private citizens, and are you going to work with us in committee?
Quand on dit en français,
When in French you use the vous, it is as if you're addressing directly to the other member.
Thank my honourable friend for the question. The advantages to private citizens, security is always an advantage, but security cannot come at the expense of liberty. We have the Charter of Rights in place, and it must be respected. There are a number of provisions. Section 11 and Section 12 of Bill C-8 infringe Section 7 of the Charter because it's a deprivation of our essential services without procedural fairness. Section 10 and 11 of the Act also infringe on Section 8 of the Charter because it's a deprivation of privacy against unreasonable search and seizure. Section 11, 14, 16, 18, and 19 also infringe Canadian liberties because it's a deprivation of Section 1 justifiable limits and the proportionality of any legislation upon a person's freedom, even when national security is a justifiable ground under Section 1. So there are benefits. Security is a benefit to Canadians, but it cannot come at the expense of liberty.
So there you go. I'd say probably 90% of the audience here didn't watch this to the end. 10% probably did. And that's what the modern left, the Carney liberals, who are just an extension of the Trudeau liberals, want to do. And if it all works, maybe they can look at reaction channels and say, you know, there's a cause for concern. I see a lot of hate there. There's a lot of animosity. How about we just cancel that too? Yeah, let's just turn this off and turn something else off. And that's what's probably going to happen. So it could even affect the reaction channel. You know, we'll have all our media be absolutely sanitized. That might be a bit of a stretch to say that reaction channels will be next. The thing is, it doesn't matter what YouTube allows. If the Canadian government decides that your material is too mean to be published, then you just disappear from the internet. And you don't even know what the reason was because you never had a day at court for it. Please, if you think anybody else might appreciate this, then forward it to them. Thanks.